Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this session of Spokane Public Schools Keep Learning series for literacy. Today's lesson is for all our fifth graders out there, and any child who's interested is welcome to join us. My name is Mrs. Rich, and I'm a fifth grade teacher at Woodridge Elementary. I will be your teacher for this lesson. I'm so glad you are participating with me today. This is our first lesson in this series. Today, we'll be learning about point of view and using text evidence to support our thinking. For today's lesson, you'll need pencil and paper. I'll go ahead and give you a moment to gather your supplies. Okay, let's get started. Today's lesson is called My Journey on the Oregon Trail. So I mentioned earlier that our focus was going to be point of view. Who is telling the story? What text evidence proves that this is the point of view? And how does point of view influence how the story is told? So let's start with, what is point of view? Who the story is being told by. First person. So over in our chart, it says first person is the character in the story. The keywords we're looking for here are I, me, my, us, we, those types of things that show that it's only coming from one person's point of view. Second person. In the second person point of view, the narrator addresses the reader. So the keywords there are you, your, and yours. Now for third person, if you notice, it's broken into two parts. We have third person omniscient, meaning the narrator knows all the characters' thinking and actions we get to hear from each character, or third person limited, meaning we only get to hear what one character thinks. And the keywords here are he, she, and then they use specific names of people. So readers need to consider whose perspective the story is being told from, because this impacts how the reader receives the story and interprets characters' thoughts, feelings, and actions. So here's our journey for today. Who is telling the story? We're going to take a look at the text first. As we're reading, we're going to look for evidence on who is telling the story. We'll work together on our essential question, and then of course you'll have an independent activity where it's your turn to give it a go and try point of view on your own. Our story today is called Rachel's Journal, and notice we start again with this little section that's going to give us a little background on what's happened in the story. It has been 2 months since Rachel's family left Illinois in a wagon train bound for good farmland in California. During the long ride, Rachel spends time with her brothers, Ben and Will, as well as Frank and Prudence, children from other families in the wagon train. She writes about their adventures in her journal. May 10th, 1850. Pa says we are taking the Oregon Trail until it splits and we veer south for California. Now we are following the Platte River. The sight of the broad river and the bluff is restful, but the dust kicked up by all the stock is not. And by stock, they mean cows or cattle. Especially when our wagons are in the rear. Then it's so thick I can barely see past our own teams. But I found a way to escape the heat and dirt of the main road. All along the trail there are narrow cut-off paths. Pa says they were made and used by Indians and hunters. These cutoffs run diagonally to the road and are often by shady creeks, so they are pleasant to walk along. Since they always lead back to the trail, there is no need to fret about getting lost. The boys have to drive the stock, so they have no choice but to eat dust. But I take the younger children with me, and we have great fun picking berries and wildflowers and wading in the creek. May 16th. Today I had my first adventure. We had been walking on the cutoff for 2 to 3 hours, traveling upstream into a deep canyon. The trail was not only out of sight, but out of earshot as well. I liked feeling alone, but Emma fretted that we were lost and the twins were tired, whining that a bouncy wagon ride would be better than tramping on. I tried to cheer everyone by singing Turkey in the Straw when we heard a rustling in the bushes. Something much larger than a turkey. Indians! Frank pulled out his little knife, all fierceness, but I hushed him and went to look for myself. All quaking inside, I admit, but I could not let them see that. And what should I see when I parted the bushes with trembling hand? The moist snout of a very content ox chomping on leaves. Somebody must have lost him. If it had been an Indian, Frank declared, he would have protected us. I hope we have no such need. That was just the beginning of our adventure. When the cutoff reached the trail, there was no sign of our train, either ahead or behind. There was nothing for it but to continue on the cutoff in the hopes of coming out ahead of our wagon soon. On and on we walked. Frank and Emma never complained, nor did little Caroline, but those twins whined worse than the mosquitoes. Still we found no wagons. The sun set, the buffalo wolves started in to howl, and it was too dark to see the trail before us. I would have sat down in the darkness and cried, but I had to take care of the others. Then I recalled what Ben had said about looking for a high viewpoint if you get lost. So I urged everyone up a hill before us. It was not very high, but we were rewarded with the sight of 3 campfires. Since our train is not large, we headed for the smallest one, going straight across country. We barged through brambles and sloshed through creeks, but we always kept that light in view, like the beacon of a lighthouse. At last I was greeted with welcome sight of Prudence nibbling bacon. I could not help but embrace her, though she did not appreciate my smudged arms and dress. In fact, she was so startled by our abrupt appearance, she screamed, as if we were ghosts or Indians. Mrs. Arabella Sunshine, Mrs. Elias, and Mother were first joyous, then mad. In between hugging me and scrubbing my face, Mother scolded. Now I cannot take cutoffs after the noon break. That means swallowing dust in the hottest part of the day. At least we still have the mornings. May 20th. Now we are not permitted ever to walk along the cutoffs. Not that we got lost today, something much more exciting happened. Once again, we were out of sight of the train, singing as we strolled, when an Indian brave came riding straight at us. I was so amazed to see a true Indian, I forgot to be frightened. We all stood staring at him, though Frank once again reached for his knife. I hissed at him to leave it be. No sense asking for trouble. The twins hid behind my skirt and others huddled around me when the brave rode up to us and leapt off his pony. You could have heard a pin drop. He stepped toward me and said something, then held his hand straight out. I did not know what else to do but shake it, so I did. And that was exactly what he wanted. He offered his hand to each child. Even Frank shook it, grinning so broadly his mouth looked like he swallowed an ear of corn whole. And I love the imagery that's created with the figurative language here. I mean, you can see his smile so broad that corn cob just sticks all the way through his face there. The brave knew some English, and he clearly thought we were lost. He asked if I knew where our wagon was. I nodded yes. Satisfied that we were not in trouble, he got back on his pony, waved goodbye, and rode off. It was all over in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. After all the horrible stories we'd heard about Indians, we had a story of our own to tell, and a pretty funny one at that. Only, somehow, when the adults heard of our meeting, they were not amused. Instead, they lectured us on all the awful things that might have happened. And so, the cutoffs are forbidden from now on. May 30th. It has rained for days, which has the benefit of keeping down the dust, but the disadvantage of turning the trail into an enormous puddle. Despite our cover claiming to be watertight, everything is soaked through. The Platte is swollen and wild. I am relieved we do not have to ford it. Pa says we will reach the government ferry tomorrow. And I love all the extra drawings and stuff she has in here to really show us what life was like on the trail. June 7th. Yesterday was the first time I truly felt scared. Getting lost, howling wolves, Indians, nothing compares to the fury of this river. We arrived at the ferry only to discover that it had broken loose of its moorings when the rain started. Some men finally retrieved it, but it took so long that an enormous line of wagons waited ahead of us to take the ferry. The man said it would be 3 weeks before our turn came. Mr. Elias warned that we were already behind schedule, and such a long delay would surely mean crossing the Sierra Nevada mountains in the snow. No one wanted to suffer the fate of the Donner Party, frozen and starving in the mountains. Mr. Elias determined that we should take the wagons off their wheel beds and raft them over the river. The current was swift and the banks like quicksand. There was no other way. Both Sunshine families balked at the danger and refused to go first. Mr. Elias offered to cross, but he has young children, so Pa suggested we go. Mother's face was drawn tight, but she nodded. Ben and Will stayed behind to drive the stock over, so Pa, Mother, and I each took a pole to make our way across. The waves were high, and it was hard to keep from tipping. Twice I almost fell in. The second time I lost my pole and clung on to the wagon hoops. Not much help anyone after that. Somehow we landed. My knuckles were white from holding so tightly to the hoops, but Mother's face was even paler. What a relief to be on land again. And he does such a good job describing how the characters feel about this part of the trail and how frightening it is for everybody. The others followed with no mishap, and Frank declared that he was not scared, not a bit. I do not credit that. Only the stock still had to be driven over. Ben and Will, along with Samuel, John, Daniel, and Jesse, rounded up all 115 head of cattle and drove them to the river, but they refused to go in. They had no idea of the dangers of the Sierras, but they could plainly see the dangers of the Platte. 3 times the boys gathered the cattle together, only to have them split and stampede at the water's edge. It was getting dark, and it looked like we would have to camp on opposite shores when Will decided he had stood enough. He would make those cattle cross. He rode next to Bo, the lead herd ox, and just as the stubborn animal reached the banks, Will leapt from his horse onto Bo's back, clung onto his horns, kicking and screaming, drove that ox into the river. And it worked. Bo started swimming across, and all the stock followed. Safe on the other side, Will jumped off Bo and looked back to see his own horse foundering in the water. His foreleg had gotten tangled up in the loose reins. Will rushed into the water to free his horse just as a clap of thunder split the sky open. Lightning flashed with an eerie brightness, followed by pitch black and the deafening roll of thunder. In the dark, we could not see Will, but his horse clambered safely onto the shore. When the next lightning flashed, Pa cried out that Will had made it to a sandbar in the river. Whether he was dead or alive, no one could say, and while the storm raged, no one dared swim out to rescue him. That was a miserable and awful night. It was total confusion, thunder booming, oxen bellowing, children crying, men shouting, as light as day one minute, as dark as a cave the next. And to that torment of not knowing how poor Will fared and feeling utterly helpless to do anything for him, all we could do was huddle together, a pile of drenched human rags, as the men worked blindly to control the stock. At dawn, the storm quieted, and Pa rushed into the turning river and brought back Will's limp body. He was so pale and still, I thought sure he was dead. Pa started rubbing him down. When at last he opened his eyes, the whole company cheered. He was alive. I have never been so proud, nor so scared. June 15th. We took some days' rest to wash everything and dry it out, to put the wagons back together and repair them, to coddle Will and return him to his usual good health. We are fortunate no one drowned in that crossing. There are several new graves of men who died that way, and we heard that in a wagon train near ours, a woman was killed by lightning. Will always claimed to live a charmed life, and now I believe him. June 20th. A different kind of storm passed by us today. A herd of buffalo. It was as if the river had leapt out of its banks and taken solid form to chase us down. A thick cloud of dust surged toward us. Then there was a tremendous noise, an earthly thunder. We could see their shaggy backs rising and falling like a great wave. Nothing could turn back such a force, so we hastily pulled the wagons close together while the boys drove the stock away. For once a cow or ox is caught up in a buffalo stampede, it is gone for good, part of a new wild herd. We cowered in the wagons and watched them come closer and closer. Mother tried to keep me back, but I wanted to see them as best I could. After all, if they plowed into us, I would not be any safer in the middle of the wagon than in the front. So I poked my head out into the whirling dust storm. I could see their eyes rolling, flaring nostrils, but Will must have brought us some of his charmed luck, and the massive beast thundered by and not through us. I have seen cattle stampede, but this was different. Buffalo were so big and so wild. I wished I could run after him. So again, our author has stopped the story there. So we only get a snippet of what has happened in Rachel's journey. And then we kind of have to use our imagination about what happens next. So let's take a look at our essential question today. So this is what we're answering today. Who is telling the story and how do you know? And we're going to use text evidence to prove how we know. So this is what we're looking at today. Key words we wanted to focus on. If it's first person, I, we, us, me. Do you remember hearing those a lot? If it was second person, you or yours. If it was third person, he or she. So you kind of have to think back and say, which one of those did I hear the most? Whose thoughts or feelings do you know about? And let's find examples throughout the text to support our thinking. Text evidence equals our proof. So here's what we're thinking. Who's telling the story? Well, the title is called Rachel's Journal, which gives us a clue about the point of view. That's why you never skip the title, because sometimes it can really give you hints about the theme or main idea. The introduction tells us that Rachel is writing about the adventures in the journal. Remember that part was in a different color? That gave us a big hint. So here's some text evidence. I tried to cheer everyone by singing in the turkey in the straw when we heard a rustling in the bushes. So I and we. The twins hid behind my skirt and the others huddled around me when the brave rode up to us and leapt off his pony. My, me, and us. So those were more hints, those special words we were looking for. We get to hear how Rachel experienced the journey through her actions, her feelings, and her thoughts. So Rachel is the one telling the story today. Then we have to ask ourselves, well, how do we take all that information and form a paragraph? So here's what I came up with. The story, Rachel's Journal, so we always want to tell the name, is being told in first person point of view by Rachel, the main character. The author often uses the phrases I, we, me, and us, which indicate the story is being told from Rachel's point of view. The reader also gets to know about all the things Rachel is feeling and thinking throughout the journey. Now that we worked on it together, we're going to head to your activity. Here's what you're going to be working on today. Imagine the story is now being told from Mother's point of view. How would the story change? Use text evidence to support your thinking and go back and think about how did Mother react to certain situations. Also think about what does Mom say or do that would influence the story in a different way. What might the reader learn from Mom telling the story compared to when Rachel told it? And what text evidence supports your answer? So think about when you've been somewhere and maybe with a friend and you've both experienced the same event. Do you tell it the exact same way? Of course not, because you have it from your perspective. So that's what we're looking for with your assignment today. Thanks for joining me again for this lesson, and I look forward to seeing you next time.